feature presentation.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 112 of the Untitled Movie Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck, alongside, he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Marchin.
We've done 112 of these?
Yeah, I don't know who's still listening or watching, but, you know, they get about 30 views on YouTube.
Yeah.
So, no, I'm kidding. I mean, I don't blame people when we put up a 3-hour video on YouTube. I assume people would listen to that and not actually watch the whole thing. Not everyone's a YouTube podcast person. I was for a while, and then found myself like I like to multitask. So I switched back to audio form, but you know, it's there. I think our reviews up on YouTube make a lot of sense, but sometimes this longer show does not, but we're going to keep doing it. Eric, how are you?
Well, Matt, it is a Monday. We're, recording in the evening, and all I can say is that, some important news came in just minutes ago. Josh Duhamel has been cast in the Mighty Ducks reboot, Mighty Ducks Game Changers.
Sure, yeah. Let's kick off the show with
Emilio Estevez as NHL player turned coach Gavin Cole. Not to be confused with actor Gary Cole, although that would be funny if he was playing Gary Cole turned into
an NHL hockey player who then turns into a
coach.
We were joking before, but yeah, it'll be a mostly normal episode for the most part. We're gonna actually go through news.
We didn't want to bury the lead.
We are gonna go through news, and there's a ton of it in the last week or so. We'll also shoot the shit, but this week we actually have a bunch to talk about, because I know in our last episode we kind of just talked about bullshit like McChickens and skating and things like that. So we're back to a semi-regular show. Quickly before we get into the Gordon Bombay news, I want to know, Eric, do you think like story-wise that they'll explain his absence? Like, did he actually kill a person with a DUI this time,
or a Zamboni? He ran him over with a Zamboni.
Yeah. What?
Well, it'll be to promote somebody else's podcast quickly. There's a really good episode of the Important Cinema Club, pardon me, with Justin DeClue and Mark Hansen. They normally do the Bay Street Video podcast, but for this show, they talked about all three of the Mighty Ducks movies, and Mark,
which we did on our review for Game Changers.
Yeah, and Mark was talking about like how he watched all of Game Changers specifically and got to the end, and spoiler alert, like
we haven't.
The way that they were setting it up is that he was going to be an integral part to season 2, so it will be interesting to see how they kind of either retcon that or course correct it in a way. But yeah, it's also disappointing to think that like Coach Bombay, aka Emilio Estevez, is either an anti-vaxxer or just doesn't want to get vaccinated. So I mean, that's what happens, and so they've got to move forward. But it's just funny to think it's like, who can we get to replace Emilio? Let's get Josh Duhamel, and Josh Duhamel actually has been right now anyways been the go-to guy to replace people, because he also replaced Armie Hammer in that Jennifer Lopez rom-com Shotgun Wedding. So he's the Ron Howard of actors, Josh Duhamel.
Good for him. Little housekeeping. This Friday, January the 28th, we'll be doing our first ever live episode of this show. That should be interesting. It'll be at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific, over on the Kind of Funny Games Twitch handle. So twitch.tv/kindoffunnygames, with special guest Greg Miller. Should be fun. You guys have heard me talk about Kind of Funny a lot. I've appeared on Screencast and a couple different shows over there. I've done a show with pretty much everyone of the main cast of Kind of Funny except for Greg, so I'm excited to chat with him about video game movies. I know he's a big advocate for day and date digital and home releases, especially being a new father and stuff now too. So excited to talk to Greg. I hope you guys can join us. If not, it'll be up on podcast services and YouTube on the following Monday, so after the weekend. So that should be fun. Yeah, Eric, it a little snowy again today here.
A little. It's been freezing for the past week or so, like dipping down to -20 at night. You can't feel
It's
your
nothing.
your
I went
hands
skating.
or
I went skating in
fingers.
minus 21, minus 30 with windshield
Okay, we
chill.
get
Check
it.
out the last episode, everyone. Thrilling content. But yeah, I know. I looked outside and it looked like a whiteout again today. So I've just been, and I mean, there's nothing to do anyway. But have you been watching much? Have you just been? Last week we talked about we've been watching a lot of TV, and that's kind of continued for me at least.
Yeah, same. I mean, we can't really talk about the newer episodes, but if you go over to Untitled Movie Reviews, you can listen to us chat about the first 3 episodes of the After Party. So basically, after watching that, I caught up with the other episodes up until the finale, which is not available to us yet. So we'll talk about that more when the embargoes lift for each individual episode. But I will say that there are a lot of interesting sort of moments and avenues that the series explores that were very unexpected and exciting to kind of dig deep into that. And I think it's becoming other than like Apple TV Plus is really interesting because they have so much money to work with and they have so much content as well, but it kind of feels like they're making it for the sake of competing with Netflix or Disney Plus, but they don't also really advertise a lot of the stuff. So when you go
Yeah.
on to the press site and see 12 or 13 shows that are available now in addition to what's coming, you're kind of thinking to yourself like, why aren't they maybe targeting this better? And some of it that I have seen, with the exception of Ted Lasso, isn't that good. It kind of feels like it's just, again, they're making this stuff to kind of fill a quota. But watching the After Party, I would say that them spending millions and millions and millions of dollars on these programs justifies it alone for both Ted Lasso and the After Party, specifically in terms of their narrative based content. And
Yeah.
both of those shows are comedy sort of adjacent or focused, but there is some drama in Ted
In
Lasso.
both.
But
Yeah.
but I mean, yeah, the After Party, where again we can't talk about it too much, but the After Party does have some sort of kind of almost bitter notes of melancholy in there as well. But yeah, I think that they are the flagship shows of Apple TV Plus, and it's just, again, interesting thinking I knew nothing about this until you told me that Christopher Lord was directing this series that Lord and Miller were also producing. I didn't know anything about it whatsoever. And again, that goes to how Apple barely seems to be interested in advertising even their films. We've talked about this in the past as well, with Coda and the Tragedy of Macbeth more recently.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think their streaming platform is great. I feel like I know we watch these on the screener site, and for screener sites it's not bad. But their actual streaming platform, the quality and the bit rate, and if you're watching it in 4K, Dolby Vision, Dolby Atmos, there's a consistency to the look of all of their shows that I actually do appreciate. That doesn't feel like the Netflix thing where everything looks exactly the same, but I mean it more so from just a quality standpoint. You can really tell that they put a lot of money. They're a tech company first and foremost. So, um, just their streaming quality is fantastic. And I actually kind of find them I guess I don't watch a lot on Apple TV, and I think they are getting better with more and more intriguing content. I know they pushed out the morning show really hard. I know they had that show with Jason Momoa, I
Yeah.
think, right? And nothing really kind of grabbed me. And then on the film end, they're spending more and more money. I mean, we even have a couple stories today about I mean, we can talk about it right now, I guess. Not Sundance, Skydance. Sundance is happening right now.
Well, one of their films is playing at Sundance, which is The Sky is Everywhere, which comes out on February the 11th on the site. So I'm sure we'll have a review of that as well.
Mm-hmm. But Skydance signed a first look deal with Apple TV Plus for feature films, for live action feature films. Skydance, the production company behind Mission Impossible and a ton of other
The
things. They've always
Terminator.
been the Terminator. They've been partnered with Paramount for the longest time. So those franchises will all stay, or at least have a first look at Paramount. So unless Paramount turns them down, they will stay at Paramount. but anything new, they're working with Apple TV Plus on a first look deal. And then also on top of that, there's a new Godzilla Monsterverse show that is going to be premiering on Apple TV Plus and not HBO Max, which I think is really interesting because it's Legendary, which is the production company behind the Monsterverse, so the
And they've been
Kong and
releasing all
Godzilla
of those
movies
films recently.
through Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that this Monsterverse show, I wonder if they went to Warner Brothers first and then Warner either turned it down, or I don't know how that exactly works, but it's interesting that we're going to get a Monsterverse series that is tied to those movies that are, HBO Max. Godzilla vs. Kong was there not that long ago.
Well, it was last year. Like, that's one of
Yeah.
those movies that I like looking at all the films that I watched in 2021. That was one of the few films I was like, oh, I thought that was the year before.
Yeah, no, I know. Everything's blending together for sure. But I think you're just seeing Apple TV flex, how much money that they have. And I think the Godzilla show is one thing. The Skydance thing is another thing. Like, I bet you Warner looks at that and goes, that's way too expensive. We can't make a Godzilla TV show. Like,
Look,
that,
we've already committed
like,
to the Dune Sisterhood series.
Yeah,
we can't
and even
make
that, you can just kind of shoot it in the desert and then kind of figure it out afterwards. But this, I feel like, is going to be incredibly expensive, and then even prying Skydance away from Paramount, I think is. And then you're seeing the other deals that they've made with Scorsese and
Ridley Scott,
Spielberg,
who's shooting
Ridley
his
Scott,
Napoleon film right now, and yeah, and like again, another show that is kind of popular, and I think it's on its third season, is M. Night Shyamalan's Servant series and things like that. So you are seeing a lot of, and Spielberg even, initially kind of, and J.J. Abrams getting invested in the business of Apple TV Plus. I still feel like in terms of their growth, they have a ways to go, because like when Netflix first started, Netflix's sort of original programming, the two things that they were kind of really selling were both House of Cards and Orange is the New Black. And now with Apple TV Plus, their big thing was like, well, we have Ted Lasso. And now it's like we have Ted Lasso and we have all these other things that are kind of either niche or marketed specifically for, a targeted demographic. And like even the After Party like isn't probably going to be for everybody, and it's probably going to cater first and foremost.
Do you think it'll catch on? Like Ted Lasso?
I think the murder mystery aspect is popular enough, and it does feel like this show sort of gains a little bit of momentum because of Knives Out doing so well, and that kind of this resurgence of the whodunit recently. So I do think if people give it a chance, they will be interested in it, at least in the mystery part of it, and trying to figure out who the killer is. And I think that's enough.
And the week-to-week format should probably help that
exactly
too.
And that's something that, even though in the past we've talked about, like, sometimes it's fun to binge something and have everything there and kind of watch it over a weekend, but it doesn't always work for every program. And I think something like the After Party, much like what we were talking about with Yellow Jackets, it almost works better as a week by week basis kind of thing, where you can have a conversation over an entire week in terms of just that one episode, and it lingers for longer, right? And you have this sort of social media boom about it as well, and people continually talking about it until the next episode, where if you release it all at once, it's like people talk about it for a weekend or a month or so, and then it kind of fades, unless it's
best case scenario, a month, worst case a weekend, or
like
worst
Netflix
case
right
not
now
all,
has Squid Game still, and they're kind of riding that high.
Season 2, they confirmed
announcing that, and then it's going to be this bigger world and things like that. But you look at like a lot of their programming, I mean, like right from Tiger King and that kind
Tiger King 2 came out and no one talked
exactly
about it.
The first one benefited partly because of the pandemic beginning, and people all wanted something to kind of like distract themselves, and also to find something that was maybe like they could be like, oh well, at least my life isn't that weird or that bad, and because of that, I think it did very well, and it is trash television. but then again, like you even look at something like the Queen's Gambit or any, like I'm not knocking what Netflix is doing or in terms of their format. I'm just saying that not everything works on a week by week basis. I think that's why like even something like The Last Dance, which is amazing, but was a partnership with ESPN, and
And
the way
that's
that
why
they
it
were
was week to
releasing,
week. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's why it benefited them so much, because people were just so engrossed by one episode and just focused on it for so much longer.
Do you think Netflix ever changes? I think eventually they probably have to spice things up, so they do. But then that's a double-edged sword, I guess, because then your people who love your format of just getting everything and binging it are going to be mad when you go week to week, right? I think we
Yeah.
even saw that with some recent series. I think
Well, they
people
tried that with the
complaining about the
Fear
Disney
Street
Plus
series,
stuff.
right, on
Yeah.
Netflix, right? Where like even though it was a film series and a trilogy, they released each individual film
Week by week.
week
Yeah.
by week, right? So and I think they're doing that with the new Kanye West documentary film trilogy, that they're
Okay,
releasing it like
interesting.
one a week.
Yeah.
But it is like a film trilogy and not like an ongoing series, but it's still doing that week by week basis where it's like, tune in next week to
Yeah.
see this,
Like,
episode or this exciting conclusion of.
yeah. Stranger Things is so huge for them that I feel like it could have even been bigger if it was a week to week show.
Yeah.
And like I really do think that. And they'll never change that, at least with established series and stuff, but it'll be interesting. I think they had it's not a news story that we have, but their quarterly earnings came out and they missed a bunch of targets, and that they like subscriber base and added subscriptions, and they're struggling to add. I think they've saturated the market so much that they're struggling to find those last few people that don't have a Netflix account and how they can convince them to get one at this point. So it's interesting. I don't know. But then going back to Apple, yeah, I hear what you're talking about. The only things, like, I watched a bit of Mythic Quest, which I thought was good. I don't have like a strong desire to like make sure I go watch this new season. It's one of those shows that I'll get around to it eventually, and then on a rainy day I'll binge the whole series. I
And you
tried
like
watching
the Ewan McGregor series, but I didn't include that in terms of like,
Don't Look Up, yeah, or
yeah,
Don't Look.
because
Yeah, sorry, not Don't Look Up. Long Way Up.
yeah, because I was
Um,
including more so just like the narrative features and
yeah,
the
but I
narrative
mean that.
series.
But again, even I think as a whole package, that series is fantastic. And going back and watching the other ones in 4K and Dolby Vision, I think was a lot of fun too. And then I gave Physical a shot, which Craig Gillespie has just been nonstop the last couple of years. With I, Tonya, with Cruella, with Physical, he has Pam and Tommy coming up, which
He's
we should have a
developing the
review.
Chippendales film with Dev Patel.
Yeah. So I gave that a shot. Never didn't really work for me. Dickinson, Nevis watched a bit of that, and I watched a bit with her, but I don't think that stuck. I've wanted to watch The Shrink Next Door, but I haven't heard one way or another. This is kind of the problem that you're talking about. Like, that came out with Will Ferrell, Paul Rudd, was, the typical thing, 3 episodes, and then week to week, and I just didn't hear many people talk about it. I think it's supposed to be good. It's just, and it has, I like both Will Ferrell and Paul Rudd a lot.
And you think that would be a big selling point for a lot of people that love, like, say, Anchorman or something like that would be, and also like Paul Rudd, kind of the cachet of being, the most sexiest man alive, and riding that high and like really promoting it. But it almost,
and Will Ferrell doing something dramatic again too, right?
Yeah, but it almost just comes and goes. Like, it's just it's
yeah.
Unless you are actively seeking out new content on the site, it's almost like you could just go through a week or a month or a year and not know what they're releasing.
And I think that's just growing pains for them. And I don't think they really care, Eric. It's something that we talk about where they have so much money that I think right now they're using it as a additional thing we do that is like a add-on to all the tech that they actually make. And like any phone you buy, everything I open, there's another get 3 months of Apple TV, get a year of Apple TV for free, or they're like, sign up for any Apple thing and we'll give you an entire year for free. Because I feel like it's just like an add-on service that they have, and they're just throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks, and then also building relationships and all that kind of stuff, where I don't think any of this matters if it does well or not, because they have so much money to burn that they're just doing this to start establishing, hey, look, we can do this, we'll give you creative freedom, we're great to work with, we'll get better people to work with, and then they'll slowly build it up. And I don't think that they really care if they have a lot of paid subscribers or anything like that. And I could even see them using this to establish something before Apple. I mean, we didn't cover it, I think, on the last episode. I think it broke either right after or maybe right before. It's more of a video game thing, but Microsoft purchased Activision Blizzard for $70 billion, or it ended up being like 68 point whatever billion, which is just under what Disney paid for 20th Century Fox. And, you could argue, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Monopolies and everything. And I think you're just going to start seeing, unfortunately, like bigger companies swallow up even other big companies, and then even some smaller ones. So I wouldn't be surprised if Apple eventually, just buys another studio or another streaming service or something to consolidate things. And then that's why they're just kind of working on the tech and putting things out, and it doesn't really matter. But yeah, I mean, Ted Lasso was a huge hit for them. And I hope After Party is. To all the points you make, that worries me that it's just going to kind of come and go and no one's going to really talk about it.
And
then
Lord and Miller, a lot of their stuff, like pre 21 Jump Street and Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, well, even Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, those shows or those movies and their programs are growers. Like, they're things that take time to really build an audience. Like, you even look at something like Clone High, it's become a cult success over the decades, with people kind of finding it after watching 21 Jump Street, or more recently the Mitchells versus the Machines, and wanting to go back and see what they did to begin with and where they started. And so like, I feel like Lord and Miller are those guys that kind of build word of mouth, where maybe like a show like The After Party, if it had a little bit more sort of muscle in the marketing, would benefit a show like that. But it's going to have to really work on people like critics, like entertainment journalists, that have watched it, really kind of championing it and continually talking about it. So when it is available this Friday, January 28th, I think that it's going to be one of those shows that hopefully, if given the chance, should catch on.
Yeah.
But again, saying where they are now, who knows?
It's got a great concept, so I think that will also help. Like, to the point that we made in the review, like, it does keep things interesting, and you'll always, I think, whether they do little teasers to tease what the genre of the week is going to be, I think that will keep people interested. Or even someone who likes musicals, and they go, oh shit, episode 3 is a musical, or likes, I won't spoil anything,
or likes the Fast and the Furious.
Yeah, exactly. And like, those are in those first 3 episodes, a rom-com. And then there's some, without breaking embargoes, there's some really cool things that they do in the next episodes that touch on different genres. And to the point we made in the review, like, it's a really clever show, not only in its mysteries, not only in its comedy, but like in it's the way that they even shoot the different episodes based on the genres is really kind of cool. So I hope it picks up too, and I hope Apple TV does well, because they have a good streaming platform. They're starting to scoop up really good filmmakers and things like that. It's just with a lot of these streaming services, dude, I think Disney's the only one, and I hate always going back to them, but like that, like, markets all their shit properly, like to the point where I'm like, I know it's out, I know when it's coming out, I anticipate Wednesdays. I guess HBO, to an extent, I think has always done, actually not even to an extent, has always done a great job of knowing Sunday nights are huge on HBO and things like that. So
it's not TV, Matt, it's HBO.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, we're not going to really talk about it too much, but it is fascinating as well. And I guess we could put this all in there, is that, like, with Amazon is similar to Apple, where, their media production is not their their sort of first and foremost interest.
I think Prime's the one no one talks about.
Exactly. But they already released a teaser, and it's not really even it's Morfydd Clark of Saint Maud doing a voiceover for the new Lord of the Rings series, but that show doesn't come out until September, but they are marketing it in January already.
They're gonna put everything behind that,
so it does seem like, you know, in terms of like what would be the Apple equivalent of that coming up, where it's like, oh, they have something that they have put a lot of money
even
into.
Netflix is looking for that next thing, right? Like I think Stranger Things is coming to an end. Squid Game was a surprise hit to them, but on top of that, I'm trying to think of like they're gonna try with their movies and stuff still, and they've always been looking for, you know, that's why we're getting a Red Notice 2, and we're getting like the Old Guard 2 is like shit no one really wants.
Well,
but, like,
especially when it like, Netflix. I mean, we've talked about this as well before, where Netflix does okay when it comes to giving an auteur filmmaker or you know, somebody, you know, a festival movie a shot, and giving, you know, the bells and whistles that come with that, you know, whether you get like a Charlie Kaufman or more recently a Jane Campion, like
creative freedom and stuff like that. Yeah.
But in terms of their, you know, their potential franchises, they really have struggled with creating something that people are interested in, creating
Buzzworthy
sequels
stuff,
and sort of building upon a first film.
Or,
you know, they're not Disney Plus. They don't have it's almost like, it's like you need the name brand recognition to really establish something, and I think probably they will be hoping that they'll get some of that with the Knives Out sequels, where it's like, okay, we already have this movie that was a huge hit, again talking about the whodunit thing that kind of reestablished and reinvigorated a subgenre. And now that it's already played in theaters, it's become a worldwide hit. They have both the sequels, the second one's coming out this year. You know, Rian Johnson has become a name because of Knives Out, and you know, some controversy with how people react to The Last Jedi specifically. So I almost feel like they are really putting a lot into this.
Is that too much pressure on Knives Out, though?
Yes,
like,
I think so. For a weird little kind of like almost chamber piece murder mystery, it would be like the same thing of putting like that much pressure on the After Party, or even like Death on the Nile.
Because that was a big piece of that was a huge piece of news, is that Knives Out 2 looks like it's coming fall 2022. Probably will do the festival circuit again. The first one played TIFF. I'd assume this one will, and it'll play the fall festivals. But I gotta go back and revisit Knives Out, because I was one of the people that just was kind of soft on it overall. But I've had
a dull blade for you.
I like whodunits. I like murder mysteries, single location stuff, Agatha Christie kind of stuff is really intriguing to me, and that's why Knives Out was super intriguing to me.
Well, you like the Hateful Eight as well, in terms of
I love that. I just kind of left me, you know, TIFF is a weird time too, where I don't trust myself sometimes, like, even though we professionally review movies during the festival and stuff, but sometimes you see something and your brain is mush, or your expectations are one spot, or just numerous things can kind of warp what you think about a movie. And I go back and revisit things years later and I go, I'm a moron. That was great. So I am hoping that's what happens with Knives Out. But I feel like for that to be like the thing, like Netflix is banking on, like, yeah, it's a great filmmaker. The first one was really successful. You know, it's got a great concept that they can revisit every 2 to 3 years or something like that. Just have Daniel Craig keep coming back, and it's something he can keep doing after Bond and have a steady kind of thing.
And it's not as physically demanding as Bond.
And he's having a lot of fun with it, right? And it seems like, you know, everyone in those movies will. And if he can establish that to be a thing that's on Netflix every couple years that people anticipate, and has, I don't know, maybe he goes the social commentary angle again, and each thing kind of says something about the world or whatever, I think could be really, really interesting. But I don't know. I think that's a lot of pressure to put on Knives Out, which feels like, I don't know, like I'm good on him for getting the $100 million each or whatever they got. Like, that's amazing. But yeah, I think the streaming wars, it's something we revisit and that's kind of what this topic has been. and kind of incorporates a lot of the news, because I feel like, even in the time we're in with theaters being closed, that's what we kind of have to resort to. And I think it is the future, and it's the present, really. And everyone's doing it a similar but different way, and they're starting to get too many of them. And we talk about this all the time. So something has to kind of break, and them figure things out. But everyone's kind of successful and also struggling in similar ways and learning from each other. Because I think the stuff we're talking about on Apple TV is the problem Netflix has had for a while, of just their stuff comes out and you almost don't realize, or they start to produce so much. And I don't think Apple's at that point where it's producing too much. But yeah.
Well, they're producing a lot of stuff. They just don't know what to do with it. Like, that's the thing, where it's almost like, again, they have all this content and they just throw it at the wall and see what sticks. And really only one show has at this point, in terms of defining like what an Apple show is, or like why you go to Apple TV Plus to begin with. But it is interesting as well. Like, I've been reading a little bit about this week on David Poland's The Hot Button. He has a 3-part series. He's done part 1 and 2, where like he's talking about, the statistics of, streaming services versus cable. And it's just interesting that like cable isn't completely dead yet. There are still a lot of people, an older demographic, that still have cable. And it's not, it will go away, and it will become completely streaming at some point. But it's funny how we underestimate
there's so many shows. And there are a couple shows like, Nevis and I watch The Amazing Race. I watch a lot of hockey. Like, there are those kind of like, times we have to turn on the cable box or whatever to watch something live on TV. And that doesn't happen very often anymore. But the commercials you see, I'm like, what the hell is this show?
Right.
And then you look online on Wikipedia and it's like, oh yeah, that show gets 13 million viewers every week. And you're like, oh, this is a thing for a lot of people still. It's just a corner of entertainment that I don't participate in much anymore. But I see shows constantly getting advertised, whether they're bad Canadian shows on CBC or, just cable cop shows and medical shows and things like that, which is the majority of, I feel,
you
like,
got your Hudsons
cable.
And Rex, you got your Son of Creek, which is supposed to be like Schitt's Creek, kind of capitalizing on that success. In terms of Canadian, but then again, like, you look at like what some of the most popular shows are on television. You have Blue Bloods, you have NCIS, you have Law and Order, which is coming back. All these
which
shows,
is that older generation,
the baby boomer generation, that are watching cable as if streaming doesn't exist. But that's another thing that you need to keep in mind. Like, I've been thinking a lot about this with my grandparents as of late. The world doesn't really consider anybody in their late 60s into their 90s in terms of, how the world is run now. Because, you look at the way that not even media is, but, setting up a doctor's appointment now, like, a lot of it is done online. But it's not, we don't consider, our grandparents' generation, or, we have to always help them. And it's interesting that the world, like, I'm thinking about this now, and obviously it's not something I have to worry about immediately, but like, I wonder if we make it into our
someone's
70s
gonna have
80s,
to show you how to plug into the metaverse, man.
Exactly. And that's the thing that scares me, because like, I feel so bad for a generation of people that don't use a computer or don't have a smartphone.
I think we're good because we grew up at the beginning of this tech boom, where, we lived through both. I think we were old enough to be smart during the pre-internet days, or we kind of grew up as the internet did as well. So I think there's going to be some things we're just never going to understand. But like, but I think when it comes to tech, I know I'm a bit more techie than you are, and
you
like,
adapt to things, and you adopt early technology.
I adopt early on everything.
Or if you've worked with it,
not NFTs,
worked within
though.
the field. NFTs. Like, I have never used TikTok, but I know you used it for work.
I mean, I worked on TikTok, which I don't know if I would. I think I eventually would have downloaded TikTok if I didn't work on it, because it did get so huge that, I knew people who, when I worked on it 2 or 3, 4, 5 years ago now, because I don't know how the pandemic works. 3 years ago, maybe.
3 years ago,
it was just in that rise of TikTok. It was already huge in China, but it started becoming huge in the US. And I remember it just being a trash fire even, and then there'd be the odd funny thing or creative thing, and then it just became even just gigantic. And like I still use TikTok now. Like it's just mostly like what Vine was. You used Vine, right, Eric? Like
No,
it's
I
a
never
better
use Vine.
you
I
never
know
used
what Vine
either?
is, but
Okay,
I
yeah.
watched Vine
It was
videos on YouTube because there's like
right.
compilations and
Yeah,
stuff like
which
that.
you can do with TikTok as well. But there is some really funny stuff. There's some creative stuff. There's, you know, there's people doing film criticism or film analysis on TikTok. And some of it is, you know, not great. Some of it is they're very charismatic people on there that are doing cool things. And like there's very funny shit on there. And the algorithm is the thing where I feel like going back to the streaming thing is, you know, I think a lot of these places are just jealous of TikTok's algorithm because it is so good, Eric. Because like you haven't used it, but if I told you to download TikTok tonight and use it for a week or two, you'll start like every video it feeds you is so tailored to exactly like whatever their algorithm is, whether this mathematical equation on if you like something, if you share it, the amount of time you spend watching it, how they categorize their content is kind of wild to the point where that keeps you engaged on the platform because it's constantly feeding you shit it knows you like. Where I feel like that's going back and bringing this to our original point of these streaming wars is like they have that problem of wanting to keep you watching stuff, but I think it because of the commitment is a bit larger on a lot of this stuff on Netflix and Apple TV and Amazon and Disney Plus and things like that, that, you know, TikTok, they're 15 seconds to 3 minutes. Of course,
and it's
you
quick
can
to
kinda
make
keep
those
scrolling.
things too,
But
right?
you might sit there for 3 hours and watch it where you could have watched the Batman.
Right,
But
it's a lot quicker to make that content
yeah,
than say like
sure.
a Netflix or an Apple TV Plus, because first they have to make it,
It's a
and
very
then they
different
have
thing,
to,
but they're still
yeah.
competing with
Where
one another.
TikTok is so quick, it's reactionary, right? Like it's reacting to
It's all
what you're watching.
user created too,
Yeah,
right? And then so it's very different, but I feel like there are some similarities
it's
there. But
what
going back,
it's kind of what Quibi wanted to be.
Quibi wanted to be
Yeah,
the TikTok of streaming services, and we saw how that worked. No one wanted to consume their content in 10-minute segments for 40 chapters or whatever it was. God, Quibi, what a time.
R.I.P.
But yeah, I think eventually the metaverse stuff is you know, I think a lot of people are hesitant to adopt new technology, and I have no doubt that VR is the next big step. Like again, just the things people are pitching right now just look like a horribly shitty version of Ready Player One. And I'm like, if anyone say what you want about that movie or the book or whatever, um, I don't think the message there was, hey, we should do this. Like,
Right. Or even
which
the Matrix,
seems to be
right?
like, yeah, the Matrix is even predates that and is exactly kind of what they're trying to do. And it's really interesting. And I have no doubt, like, I think once a accessible VR headset that is comfortable to wear and that looks great is available to everyone, that will be the thing that kills movie theaters, and that will be the thing that kills a lot of this stuff. Because if I can sit in my living room and get an experience on a giant movie screen that's almost, you know, looks better than what I would get and customizable to proper masking, Eric, and no one on their phones kind of thing, but it looks like I'm sitting in a theater. Why do I need to go to a theater? And I think that's what the metaverse stuff is, like sporting events and different things. Like I don't want to sit in a 3D space and watch something act out around me. That does not sound appealing to me. That sounds stressful and I don't want that. But like if you go, Matt, you can throw on these goggles and you can sit in the stands at a hockey game, or it'll look exactly like you're sitting in a movie theater with great sound. I'm wearing these headphones or whatever. Like, I don't know. I guess if you're craving that experience with other people, but there's got to be a way that's, you know, I don't know how that works, but that's where all of this shit is going, and it started with streaming services.
Well, you know where it really feels like it's going? I can't believe I'm pulling from this. It almost feels like we're going to a place, because even the way that you look at like how robot technology and android synthetics are being built now, and trying to create like a lifelike
Yeah.
version of whether it be a sex doll or some sort of.
Robot umpires are going to be in baseball next
Well,
year.
I was thinking, like, you look at the movie Surrogates with Bruce Willis,
Sure,
where
yeah.
like we stay at home and we plug into a robot version of ourselves, and that
goes
version
out
of
and does
ourselves
everything.
goes out and does whatever. Like, I feel like that's where we ultimately are.
Yeah, but
going
it's going to
to.
be an addition. That is what it is. You're just creating an avatar and you'll live most of it. We already, here's the thing. People who are hesitant towards this, I'm like, you're already doing it. And I sound like one of these douchey, like,
We already live on your
Metaverse.
phone probably
You
for
live
like
on the
8
internet.
hours a day.
You live on the internet. You
Yeah.
do. Whether it's social media, whether it's watching stuff, like, it's just taking everything we do and putting it into a interactive 3D kind of space. It's just right now it all looks like garbage. Like everything they show, they're like, I'm in the metaverse. You can buy this property and NFTs and put them out in a digital museum and own it in your home. And you're like, all of this sounds so dumb because it looks awful and it's not appealing. Like everything looks like what the Sim, like worse than the Sims. I played the Sims online in like 2005 or earlier, and I'm like, that looked better. PlayStation Home people are talking about, and like there was a game called Second Life that all looked better than some of this metaverse stuff that they're doing. But like, what is appealing to me, and Apple is supposed to release a headset this year, but it might be more like business focused rather than like
Just
consumer
half an
focused.
apple.
Yeah. But I've played with, I got a VR headset literally right here, and it's in my I'll pull it out, but my uncle lent it to me because he's like, I don't even use it, but I have like an Oculus kind of headset, and I've used it a bit, but it's still janky enough that it's not super appealing. And if you do get motion sick or wear glasses, there you got to figure all that shit out. But um it's, you can watch stuff and it looks like you're watching in a movie theater, like I'm saying. It's just there's something off still about it, and I think that's what we need to figure out. But I don't know.
Yeah,
I
another
don't know
film
even
that
know
kind
how
of
it goes.
predicted a lot of this was David Cronenberg's Videodrome, where like you can basically, both with reality TV and sort of logging into a world that is
Yeah.
basically customized for your own personal fetishes. And like,
Yeah.
I feel that that's basically where we are now, to your point, where we spend most of our lives online, whether it be for work. I mean, most people now, if they are, working either remotely from home or have to go into an office, are either on their phones or they have a computer, but they are sort of following trends, gathering data, researching online. It's not tactile anymore. I mean, it's the same conversation we have with physical media, where, people that go to a library or do something that is kind of completely without any traces of
Very
analog. Yeah, it's so rarefied at this point that,
Yeah.
like, again, going back to older people having trouble, like one thing that I had some trouble with, that that you helped me out with, was, but also I feel like generations that are in their late 60s into their 80s or 90s, if you're traveling somewhere, if you're from Canada specifically and you need to use the
Arrive can.
yeah, the Arrive
like
Can app, like you need somebody like a grandchild to, or a son or daughter that knows this stuff, right? Like that's also tricky for a lot of older generations, and the world isn't made for seniors. It really isn't. And that's something that I've been thinking a lot about recently, because again, like I had to kind of help book an appointment for a chest x-ray for my grandmother, and it was all done via online. Like she
Yeah.
couldn't call in, and like she doesn't have a computer. She's never used a computer. So
Right.
you know.
Just, yeah, I feel you. And I feel like it's interesting where we went from that conversation, starting with streaming, but I think that it all is tied together, and it'll be fascinating to see where everything kind of goes in the next,
because
5
that's
to
the
10
market
years.
that they really haven't tapped into as well. Like that's something that I think is really worth noting, is that a lot of that generation don't have, they have cable. That's it. They don't have even on demand services and things like that. So
Sorry, I was just checking on something. Yeah, I totally agree. Moving on from that, I watched Free Willy the other night and it fucking ruled. It was so much fun. If we're sticking to what we've been watching on a streaming service, I watched it on Crave. It was on there. And Nevis and I had an absolute blast. I haven't seen that movie in 20 plus years. I probably have. I watched it so much as a kid. I remember it, and like watching it was so much fun because like things just kept coming back to me like scene by scene where I'm like, I remember this so vividly. And I haven't had that much fun watching, it's pure nostalgia. But I think it's like a legitimately like good or fun kids movie. And like, I was surprised that it held up as well as it did. Like by no means is it like, very deep or anything, but like as a solid kids movie with a good message, I'm like, this shit rules. And I'm like, this was really, really good. Soundtrack slaps. I know we don't like to talk about Michael Jackson, but that song at the end, fantastic.
that was a big part of that movie's promotion.
Oh, huge. Because right when that song came on, another song I hadn't listened to in forever.
Yeah.
And I remember after that movie, as a young boy, I was 4 when that came out, and you would have been 5, I
Yeah.
think. And I might have seen it a bit later. I don't think I saw it in theaters or anything, but it was a huge part of my life. And it popped up, and Nevis and I were like, do you want to watch Free Willy tonight? And then had a blast. So, and they made 3 of them with the same cast, and I was like, oh, I totally thought 2 and 3 would have had completely different people in them. I'm like, how do
three's a new character. Like 3 focuses on a new character, but Jesse, right?
Yeah,
he's in it, but he's like a supporting role.
Is he? Yeah, okay.
Cool. It's almost like the way that like going back to Mighty Ducks, like Coach Bombay in the 3rd one is
because he probably gets too old, right? Yeah. So they need another kid to come in. But I'm like, oh my god, I totally thought this would have been a franchise where it's just about a whale and they just kind of bring in a new cast and it's direct to video. But I'm like, no, they made a whole trilogy with like Michael Madsen comes back for the 2nd one, and like I don't think he's in the 3rd. I think it's what you're talking about, where they only bring Jesse back and the Randall, the guy that he befriends, who worked at the park. But like, I'm surprised how much it stuck with me, and I'm like, I had a blast watching that movie. It was so much fun.
The 90s was such a huge time for kids movies, where it was like, we need a kid and an animal. I think Free Willy was kind of the film that kicked a lot of that off, or at least was the most popular of those films. Because like I think of like some of them I haven't even seen, but like there's a lot of movies where like think of like Homeward Bound, the remake of that, or you think of Dumps and Checks In, or Andre, the movie with the seal. Like there's a ton
MVP.
of those, like MVP, a lot of those kids with an animal, or Airbud even, right? Like those movies are so popular in that,
and it's an animal that is like weirdly smart.
Yes.
like way too smart,
or can play a sport, or does something that is like Eddie's another one as well.
Yeah, watching Free Willy, I'm like, is this whale an alien or something? I'm like, it can understand English perfectly. It can like communicate with people. I'm like, it's like king of the whales, like the #1 whale. And I'm like, this is incredible. And there's just some great delivery. Like I couldn't stop laughing of like Michael Madsen delivering the line, "What are you doing with my truck and this whale?" I'm like, Nevis set the fire alarm off. Sorry, everyone. Nevis is cooking, a recurring bit on the Untitled Movie Podcast.
I'm so sorry, everyone.
It's so funny. She will turn that off in a second. Eric, I'm gonna mute you. Talk about what you've been watching.
Yeah. So
or Free Willy, whatever you want.
Well, I mean, with Free Willy, it is funny to think about. Like, again, I haven't watched in probably 2 decades. Oh, another one that I remember watching as a kid was The Amazing Panda Adventure a lot, which was
Oh
where
shit, I haven't thought about that movie in a long time.
my brother Connor was obsessed with it, weirdly enough. But yeah, like it is one of those things where it's like there's a certain trend in a certain era, and like you can pinpoint like where those movies either started or had their most successful kind of run. And I think Free Willy is that movie where it's like child and an animal film, you know, and that's kind of like the biggest sort of example of that, the milestone, the highlight of that period of time. I mean, yeah, to your point, like the Airbud movies and MVP films, they kind of kept going even now. Like I think there's still
Oh,
Airbud Air
Airbud, there's like,
Buddies.
yeah, there's a whole Airbud cinematic universe that I think we went through on this show
Yeah.
once.
So like there are people that are watching it, and I'm sure there are generations now that grew up with it that are showing their kids it and are using it as either, you know, as a babysitter or what have you. So going from Free Willy to a chode, I watched episode 4 of Peacemaker,
Hell
and
yeah.
I think the series kind of finally clicked for me. Like I liked the first 3 episodes, but there was something about episode 4 where like the combination of both kind of the subversive qualities of the characters and sort of grounded version of a DC story mixed with the kind of sympathetic nature towards a kind of pathetic character worked really well. And James Gunn's writing and directing can be a little bit too much at times, even though I do like the guy quite a bit. I think when he's working with somebody else, someone like Jody Hill, who I didn't even know directed episode 4 until
Yeah,
the
I didn't.
name came up.
I knew he directed some of the series. I think Gunn directs the majority of them, but Jody Hill and someone else comes in.
But
to
yeah,
direct one
Jody
more.
Hill's, for people that don't know, like it's so perfect. Like he's a guy that kind of came up with David Gordon Green and Jeff Nichols and Danny McBride, and you know, directs movies like the
The foot
first
fist way.
and then also like the film, like the reason why
Eastbound
Peacemaker's,
and Down, and
yeah,
yeah.
and Observe and Report.
Oh, yeah.
Observe and Report, the character that the mall cop that Seth Rogen plays in Observe and Report feels akin to John Cena's Peacemaker. And the kind of moments where you feel bad for Peacemaker and for Chris, it's both this combination of being pathetic but also self-loathing, and you can understand why, like, you know, you feel that he is a loser still, but you can still at least appreciate where the character is coming from and how he was brought up, or sort of how he feels like an outlier on society. Those things work so well in that episode. And then Freddie Storma as Vigilante
It's so good.
is amazing in this episode. You know, we were texting back and forth about this, where, you know, as he's introduced, you're thinking, okay, he's a variation on Deadpool, basically.
Sure.
Very obnoxious, over the top, the worst impulses of what Peacemaker is, but, you know, to the extreme. This episode, there was enough room and shading for him, even in terms of where his storyline goes, and, you know, his friendship with Chris, that I think works really, really well. And a moment at the end that I wasn't expecting to be as emotional for that character, because he is a sociopath, really hit. And I think that was one of the most surprising aspects of episode 4.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you. I'm still loving the series. I can't get the theme song out of my head. I listen to it constantly. I watch the intro on YouTube sometimes if I just need to smile before the next episode. But yeah, episode 4 I thought was fantastic. I think it touches on a lot of the things we touched on in the review, where I think they're even more so now into episode 4, giving each one of these kind of outcasts kind of their own little spotlight, and giving some depth to these characters that in Suicide Squad definitely didn't have any depth. But then even Cena, we talked about in the review, like in Suicide Squad, I wouldn't say he's one note or anything, but I think that, you know, he works in Suicide Squad, but because that's a big ensemble cast and he's just a, you know, a very large part of it, but just a part of that overall story. Like, you don't focus too much on him, and to get his whole series, you're like, how could they sustain this to be interesting? And I'm just shocked at how much I'm enjoying it and how much I'm intrigued to where they're going with this butterflies story. And then to your point with Freddie Storma, who got brought in 5.5 episodes in, and they reshot all the scenes because they had a different actor in that role, I think is wild, because I can't fathom anyone else doing this now. And I looked up the other guy, and I think he's like I forget who, a soap opera actor maybe, or something like that. But I just think he's done a great job, and that a character that, to your point, should be like grating and not work, but they found a good balance of that, him being a complete sociopath and him being like a doofus that I think is kind of like everyone in this series, of that mix of sociopath and doofus. So and it just works really, really well. Still very funny. The action sequences are a lot of fun. I do think that this episode toned it down like a little bit while still keeping that kind of tone that they set. And I think that was a good thing. I think we have 7 episodes in this, or is it 8? I'm not sure, but we're about halfway done now. And I'm like eagerly way more than Boba Fett. Like, we get Boba Fett on Wednesdays. And I'm like, man, is it Thursday yet for Peacemaker? Which I never thought I would say. So I'm
well, especially
absolutely all
for
in.
DC shows
Yeah.
as well, because like the Marvel stuff, it's like it becomes event television where you have to prioritize watching that, partly because of social media, but also because, you know, it's designed in a way, like a lot of TV is right now, to be addictive in that kind of cliffhanger type ending of every episode, where you need to kind of continue it where it leaves off. So when you're watching something that's either, you know, The Mandalorian or, you know, WandaVision or something like that, you're completely in tune with, you know, when the show is going to be released. I mean, like that first season of that WandaVision series, like people like actually either waking up at 3 a.m. in Eastern Ontario, or in sort of, you know, in the Eastern time zone. That to me tells you that, like, you know, again, like, you know, week to week watching is still very much alive.
For sure. Sure.
But yeah, it's a better show than I was thinking it would be, but it really does feel like it comes together in that 4th episode. Like, it's like, okay, like all the parts are now kind of like moving. I get why they wanted to kind of, you know, take this detour with this character specifically, because like watching the film, and I know you rewatched it recently as well, and you talked about it on one of the last shows, it's not the character that you would think like, oh, if I'm gonna like do, you know,
choose someone
6 or 7 episodes or 8 episodes of a series, that's not the character I would pick first.
Yeah.
You know, and James Gunn has done very well with taking, you know, pro wrestlers and playing to their strengths with although I think Dave Bautista is a better actor than John Cena, but like you look at like
very different styles, both very funny, but like,
yeah,
I think Bautista's good at that quiet brooding kind of role as well.
But they're both very literal in sort of how their comedy works, you know. But I think Dave Bautista, there's more range, and that's when you see something like Blade Runner 2049, and you see like that
Dune
one
even.
like you see like the one scene in Blade Runner 2049, and he's only in that opening sequence, but that prologue, he's so memorable that he kind of stays with you for that whole film. I don't think John Cena could pull that off.
Has that in him? No,
but not to say that John Cena isn't capable of being, you know, an entertainer, a personality, that kind of thing. But
I would say the same thing about The Rock, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think The Rock is a incredibly charismatic guy, is very good at what he does. But The Rock is
the
good
material
at,
too, right?
And The Rock is good at a specific thing. Like, I don't think I'm going for, you know, a memorable impactful performance from The Rock, but I'm there for like, you know, a popcorn movie.
Other than Pain
like
and
that.
Gain,
Like,
which he's great in that.
he's actually very good, but then that shows a bit of range, right?
Right.
Like, to be fair. Anything else you've been watching, Eric?
Yeah, so a movie that I had seen parts of, which, you know, is a literal pun, but I had never seen the whole thing, and I just had this weird inkling to watch it on Saturday morning of all times. It was just it was there, and I rented it. It just got a Blu-ray release as well not too long ago, but I was like, okay, I'm kind of curious. It's only an hour and 28 minutes, perfect runtime. Is Eric Reed's Body Parts, from I
I
think
go to the
it's
bathroom. I'll be right back.
from 1991, with Jeff Fahey of probably best known to a lot of people now from Lost. In the later series, and he plays a criminal psychologist who gets into a horrible car accident and loses his arm, but this medical team led by Lindsay Duncan's doctor attach a new one on, and you know, you think like, oh, this is this great breakthrough in medical science and technology, and it's going to change the way that, you know, amputation and sort of, you know, medical procedures work is going to happen. But then it becomes, you know, like your classic like B movie where you find out that the arm is actually, you know, formerly a part of a death row inmate, and whether or not the personality of this death row inmate is being injected into the thoughts and sort of motivations of Jeff Fahey's character. And as he slowly begins to lose control, he is, you know, thinking whether or not he is becoming a serial killer himself. And so with that, while you're watching it, it's it's not a bad idea, but it does almost feel like there's something missing from the film because it is so short. And you're watching it and you're thinking to yourself, okay, you have Jeff Fahey as this criminal psychologist who, you know, loses his arm in this horrible car accident, which is ridiculous and so over the top. It takes place on a highway, and he literally goes flying out of the windshield, but it's almost like one of those like dummies that you like, you can clearly see
Like
that
a
like
Super Dave thing?
yeah, exactly. And you can't help but laugh at it. And then when he gets this new arm attached to him, and it's the arm of a serial killer that possesses him, that begins to possess him, it's so ridiculous. But it's like I could see this working, and you know, Eric Reed wrote The Hitcher. He wrote Near Dark. This was him kind of expanding into directing as well, and watching it again, like there are parts, pun intended, that I think are interesting. Like even casting Brad Dourif as almost a red herring, because you think like, oh, he's going to be, you know, the killer, because like in the scene where Jeff Fahey goes into the emergency room when they're, you know, about to put him under to attach a new arm on, you see the other gurney, or the other gurney being brought in with this serial killer on it, and you see this, you know, bone saw being used, and they cut the head off of the serial killer. But it's funny because like the serial killer's name is Charles Fletcher, and then in Child's Play, Brad Dourif played Chucky, and Chucky's character's name is Charles Lee Ray. So you're thinking to yourself, oh, like, is he going to become the killer or the villain of the piece? And he's not. He's actually a halfway decent person, a little bit naive in terms of what's going on, because he's also a recipient of the other arm, as you learn. But yeah, it's a very schlocky early 90s horror B movie that I always remembered as a kid kind of being more sensational and disturbing than what it actually is. Like, again, even like the sort of like the main crux of the film, the body part stuff, doesn't really come into play until the last act, and it's kind of just breeze through so quickly. It's more of like this psychological drama of this guy like trying to figure out whether or not he's, you know, slowly descending into madness, or if there's something more to this. And then like there's these random like monologues where, you know, him and other recipients of you know, this donor are sitting at a bar, and he's having this metaphysical conversation about like, where does evil, you know, lie? Is it in the heart? Is it in the soul? Is it in the flesh? And you're just like, movie. Come on. But it was kind of fun for what it was, but it's not great. But
Perfect Saturday morning.
Yeah, I could see it actually working. Like, if you were to kind of, I guess pun intended as well, flesh it out a little bit more, I could see a remake of this working really well. And it's just also interesting to see at a time where like Jeff Fahey was kind of like being cast in lead roles like this, and Lawnmower Man, and now has kind of become a more respected character actor because of Lost specifically. And
I was gonna bring up Lost because that's my Jeff Fahey kind of focal point,
and he's very good in Lost. Like, he's excellent.
He's great when he shows up in season 3, 4, maybe even 2. I forget. I'm gonna rewatch that soon with Nevis because speaking of Lost, like we watched 5 seasons and then never watched the last season. So she still doesn't know how it ends. So I'm excited to finally watch that with her. We both watched fun. You said mid 90s this came out too?
Early 90s. So it was like 91.
Oh, so we both watched like early-ish 90s random movies this weekend. So love to see it. Eric, do you want to get into, we talked about a bit of the news. I don't think that there were any trailers. We talked about Moon Knight, so you guys can go check out our Untitled movie conversation for Moon Knight. I think Eric and I had a really fun 40-minute conversation on Moon Knight, as well as kind of where we see the MCU going with these pockets of the universe that they're doing with multiverse stuff and supernatural stuff, and then the grounded kind of political Earth kind of stuff. Really fun conversation there. Other trailers that dropped, there was the Cuphead show trailer that's coming out on Netflix. Speaking of Netflix, we just talked about Cuphead, popular video game that came out on the Xbox and other platforms. The art style is, I don't know if you saw any of this, Eric, but it's not really your thing because you're not a video game guy. But
no,
the art style it's got that old kind of early hand-drawn film art style kind of thing that is really really kind of cool. I'm trying to
if it was Meat Boy, I would be there.
Do you know Super Meat Boy?
Yeah, from Indie Game the movie.
That's okay. Yes, I forgot. That's how, because I'm like, how the fuck do you know Super Meat Boy? But I love that.
I mean, I don't play video games anymore, but like my extent kind of goes from like, I think N64 was like the peak of my video game knowledge, and then a little bit of PlayStation 2, and that's about it.
Yeah. I'm sure we'll talk a ton about video games and video game movies with Greg Miller on the
Super
next
Meat Boy
episode.
better be a topic of discussion.
I'm sure Greg would love to talk about Super Meat Boy with
but
you.
Indie Game the movie is a really
very
solid
good.
doc.
Yeah, it is very, very good. We got a Pinocchio teaser trailer for Guillermo del Toro's animated Netflix film that's coming out in December or the fall of 2020.
I think it is December. Yeah,
I think it is December. Basically, Ewan McGregor plays Jiminy Cricket and kind of narrates this opening trailer. It doesn't show much. You only see Jiminy Cricket coming out of the heart of Pinocchio.
But it's stop motion animation.
Stop motion, looks gorgeous, even in that one quick scene. And it's interesting, these phases we go through, because we're also getting the Disney live action Pinocchio soon from Robert Zemeckis, which has Tom Hanks in it, right?
It's Geppetto, yeah.
It's Geppetto. So, I guess. I'm excited for this. I like stop motion, and obviously Del Toro. Is he directing it or just producing
He's co-directing it?
Okay.
There's someone he's working with. It's very similar to when Wes Anderson did Fantastic Mr. Fox with Henry Selick, where it's a co-collaboration, and I think it's partly as well because Guillermo del Toro, I mean, even though there are sequences in a lot of his movies that require special effects, or he's very much a visual filmmaker. He does a lot of drawing himself. He's not accustomed to the animation department. So I think, him working with somebody like same thing with Anomalisa, right? Like,
it makes sense.
Yeah. You have that co-collaboration. I also liked this teaser, and I think what I like the most about it is that it clearly is going for, we talked about this with our Nightmare Alley review, and I think it actually will do better here than maybe Nightmare Alley. That gothic kind of tone where like even like the whites of Jiminy Cricket's eyes without any pupils kind of feels almost like it's not going to be for kids, even though they will probably market it to children. Like
it's got that like Coraline kind of Neil Gaiman kind
of
the
Leica stop motion animation,
stuff,
but like even the Brothers Kwai, like things like that, where like it doesn't really look like it's for like, I think the Robert Zemeckis movie will probably be more for children, although I think that might actually look more frightening. If Polar Express is to be a base of comparison, but I'm excited for this, and it is fascinating that like every now and then you get movies that either come out the same year that are like the Armageddons and Deep Impacts, or that come close to each other, whether it be like the two Capote movies or things like that. So
this is, I guess, cyclical, where someone goes, "Oh, it's been a while since we got."
It's been a while,
or I don't know. There's Pinocchio. There've been a ton of adaptations of Pinocchio because it's probably, I'm assuming, in the public domain, so anyone can make a Pinocchio movie. Which is why you're kind of seeing it. It's just interesting when they happen at the exact same time.
Well, we even saw that a little bit as well with Battle Angel Alita. Like that kind of plays within the Pinocchio sort of milieu as well. So
a little bit,
like that's, or even Avengers, Age of Ultron, when Ultron,
No Strings on Me.
Yeah.
So. Great sequence, was awesome in the trailer.
The movie, not so much.
I go back.
I know you've come around on it a little bit more, but
it's not. It's still lower tier MCU, but I really one day soon, maybe before the next big Marvel event movie, I want you to rewatch them in chronological order, and I want to get an updated.
That's a tall order.
I want to get an updated ranking because I feel like going off memory.
Yeah, but I feel like my group, like, going off memory for certain films is like,
I think your list won't change that much. No. Don't get me wrong. Like I think
Iron Man 3 will reign supreme.
Yes, I think the top of your list will still stay the top of your list. I'm more curious about the middle to bottom sections because I feel like that's where the most things can change just based on new context, just the way in which you watch them one after another. Like I think it's really interesting. So
I don't want to watch the Incredible Hulk or Eternals again.
You gotta do it.
Like the one I actually do want to rewatch, and I'm excited to kind of maybe go back to before the sequel comes out, is Doctor Strange. Because that's the one where it's like, I remember watching it and thinking like, it's not bad. I enjoyed it,
the same
but
thing.
I wanted to like it more.
Yeah,
but I felt like I
completely.
probably would like it more if I saw it again.
Yeah, it's one that and Ant-Man was that weird time where I'm like, those characters just didn't do much for me, and like those movies didn't do much for me. But I'm sure me, I'm a glutton for not punishment, but just more MCU.
Well, no, you love the
it's just comfort.
You're a scholar of the MCU, Matt. So you watching it again and again is no different from any academic.
I had an itch. I'm like, do I do it? Do I do the IMAX enhanced versions on Disney Plus, which I started with Iron Man, and it's just like I talked.
Yeah, you were talking about this where like the
framing
is
the framing is weird. Keeping on trailers, a couple other things we haven't covered yet. X, the new movie by
Ty West,
A24 film, came out. Loved the vibe of this trailer, and Ty West is like,
it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And it's interesting because like Ty West is one of those guys who, when he first started with both House of the Devil and The Innkeepers, which actually both, funnily enough, like if you're looking at like the actors that are in those films that kind of went on to bigger careers, both Greta Gerwig and Lena Dunham are in those movies respectively. Gerwig's in House of the Devil, and then Lena Dunham's in The Innkeepers. Those two movies were, especially House of the Devil, were great slow burn horror films, and like you really did have. And
they had like a retro vibe to them.
Oh yeah, like I remember. I think. Ooh, what do you have in there? What did Nevis make you?
Nevis made some Greek chicken and vegetables.
Oh, nice. Well, thank Nevis, because that looks delicious.
It does look good.
But yeah, like you watch House of the Devil, and like I remember Greta Gerwig and Ty West had both talked about at one point or another that like the Coke cup that she's holding in the one scene that she's in. Like, they went on like eBay and online and looked for cups that were like in the late 70s, early 80s, because like of the period, but like they needed to make like every detail authentic to when the film took place. And even if it doesn't take place necessarily within that context, like those two movies are so well done that when I remember with The Sacrament being so excited for that movie and thinking like, oh, Gene Jones, this character actor who's probably best known in that one scene in No Country for Old Men where, Javier Bardem flips the coin, like he's getting a lead role in this kind of like weird sort of quasi Jonestown-esque
interviewed
murder.
him at TIFF for that movie.
Lovely character actor. I loved him even in going back to the
Great
Hateful
dude
Eight
as well.
Sweet Dave in the Hateful Eight. And so like I can't not dislike a film for doing that, but I just remember being so disappointed with like that kind of Vice documentary behind the scenes, and Amy Simons is in that movie as well, behind the scenes style stuff, and like also I think that film maybe unfairly gets a certain connotation from the people that saw it at Toronto because of that being the press screening where a film critic called 911 during the press screening because somebody wouldn't put away their phone. But that film was really disappointing, and it kind of felt like after that, Ty West kind of just disappeared for a long period of time. He popped up. He was an actor
in the Valley of Violence, didn't he do
that?
Yeah,
with Ethan Hawke, and he was in as an actor You're Next, because he's friends with that group of guys like Adam Wingard and things like that. So.
Yeah. We'll stop eating for a sec.
How is it?
It's delicious. It's very, very good. Yeah, I love the vibe of this, and I think it has that vibe of his earlier stuff where that he, the period accurate, even from the style and the cameras and stuff that he uses. Like, I don't know. It had that, like you said, Texas Chainsaw Massacre vibe to it that I'm like, oh, I'm really, really intrigued by this. We got the trailer for Kimmy, which is coming to HBO Max. New Steven Soderbergh thriller. It didn't do much for me. It's a pretty conventional trailer. I'm hoping it's not as conventional as it looks, and I'll.
Will Matt Damon pop up in it? That is the question. I
wouldn't be surprised. But, Soderbergh is good at this kind of stuff that kind of straddles that line between art house and commercial. But, I don't know. What did this trailer do for you? It didn't do much for me.
It didn't do a lot for me either, but I don't want to judge this film by its trailer because I do feel like, when Soderbergh's in that sort of groove of doing like a schlocky B-movie kind of riff, he can have a lot of fun. Like, even though Unsane's not a great movie, there are moments in that film that are more surprising than what a lot of the promotional material had. So you can never really judge a Soderbergh movie by the marketing. You just can't. And I think like it is trying to sort of cast a wide a net as possible
because of the HBO Max thing too, bro.
Yeah, look at this like sort of paranoid thriller that is kind of using the angle of being stuck inside your home. That's kind of a little bit Alexa COVID adjacent, but also reminded me a little bit of the film Copycat with Sigourney Weaver and Holly Hunter. So like I'm still interested in the film, and I'm excited that we're getting a new Soderbergh movie, but in terms of just what the trailer did, it was very little.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that kind of wraps trailer talk. All right. A little bit of news. We talked about the biggest piece of news was just Josh Duhamel coming in to replace Emilio Estevez.
Is it Duhamel or is it Duhamel?
I'd Duhamel. Duhamel.
Gavin Duhamel, Cole, baby. Gavin Cole.
I never finished Game Changers. We reviewed the first bit of it, right?
I think it was the first 3 episodes, and then I
watched a bit more.
I did as well. I watched up until the reunion episode when you brought in the old players again,
and then I dropped off after that because that's kind of all I was looking for. It was a fun kid show, but it was very much for kids. Like I think to ride that nostalgia wave, there wasn't like a ton even for fans of like, you know, if we grew up with the movies, like, yeah, Bombay was in it. They had that reunion episode, but it was very much a kid show. And now with Bombay leaving because Emilio Estevez doesn't want to get vaccinated, everyone get vaccinated. And I'm sure everyone listening to this probably is. And if you're not, what the hell are you doing? It's just interesting now completely. I wonder if they'll bring anyone else back from that original series to kind of still have that connective tissue. But
I'm sure they're going to try to get Joshua Jackson to pop in for one episode. Because, I mean, he is doing a lot of TV right now. So it's almost like, you know, why not, you know, do an episode or like, I'm surprised they actually didn't ask him to come in and or
there's
maybe they
gotta be
did
something there. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm also just thinking to myself, if Emilio kind of plays ball or puck in this case, and they want to bring him back, and like they write like this season where, like to your point, where it's like he got arrested for the DUI, they could have him, you know, coaching a jail league and sort of create an inspiring Oz-esque season of Mighty Ducks Game Changers.
Yeah,
I would definitely be watching that. I mean, Disney Plus now, they're expanding their oeuvre with, you know, Pam and Tommy. So who knows what like a Disney Plus series
at least internationally with
is.
Star. Yeah.
Because that's a Hulu series in the US, right?
I don't think they would go the Cobra Kai route though and turn a kids show into like you know, I guess not a show completely for adults, but a show that drops F-bombs and is more, I guess, older young adult / adult series, but we'll see. Rapid fire. Cinemas are reopening in 1 week here in Canada or here in Ontario. So this is very focused on our Ontario listeners. But Eric and I are pretty pumped. I guess like it's hard to tell like, you know, what is okay to do, what's not. They've kind of stopped reporting on numbers. They, you know, there's no proof to say that transmission was happening in theaters, but they will be opening up 50% capacity, no food or drink, or they're not selling food or drink. I did,
unless you get
today,
that mask,
the snack mask. That just made me laugh. So go check out my Twitter if you want to see what I'm talking about. I love like the things that it listed. It was like 1 hot dog, a like a calzone, or like, and like 6 McNuggets. I'm sure it's a joke, but it's very, very funny. But I'm pumped. We'll finally be able to see Scream 5.
Hopefully we'll have a review at some point too.
Yeah, so I'm hoping we'll be able to see it next Monday and have a review out next week at some point. Very pumped to finally go see that. You know,
we'll have a review of the 3500 at last.
Oh right, yeah, we got to record that still. Did we record that? No, we didn't
because we were told not to.
Right, yeah. Well, we could have recorded and banked it, but whatever.
Yeah.
So anyways, thrilled that that's reopening on the 31st of
Jackass Forever, baby.
Oh, I know that. I'm pumped. I might even do like a birthday screening of that. We'll see. Maybe rent a theater for Jackass Forever. That could be fun. But we'll see. But yeah, I'm pumped that we'll be able to see 5 Cream. We'll be able to see Jackass Forever, and then leading into our next story, The Batman on March 4th. It has a confirmed runtime of just shy of 3 hours. I believe it's like 2 hours and 55 minutes with credits. So 3 hours for Matt Reeves, The Batman. You know, we talk a lot about runtimes, and I think we joke about them a lot. And of course, I like to see a good 90-minute movie, a good 70-minute movie. Petite Maman, everyone check it out when it
Body
comes
Parts
out.
At a lean 1 hour 28 minutes.
I love it. But then there are a lot of long movies that are fantastic as well. Drive My Car, which
I've watched twice.
Which Eric has watched twice and raved about. I still need to watch it. Is part of that because of the runtime? Absolutely. So, you know, it's this kind of tricky thing where I think good movie is good movie and bad movie is bad movie. Am I thrilled to see a 3-hour Batman movie? I feel like that means Warner Brothers has the confidence in it. Matt Reeves is very confident in his vision. You know, we've had long Batman movies before. All of the Nolan movies. I mean, Batman Begins, I guess, was on the shorter end because it was the first one launching it, but like not shorter. It was still 220, I think. But then you had The Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises being 2.5+ hours. Batman vs Superman was hella long. We've had, not theatrical, but Zack Snyder's Justice League was 4 hours and 2 minutes. So we've had long.
Well, even Spider-Man, right? With No Way Home, like Eternals.
2:45, yeah. Eternals
superhero movies are
getting
usually
longer.
over 2 hours.
And they're getting longer
unless
and
it's
longer.
Venom.
And, some movies it works out, some it doesn't. Eternals it didn't. Spider-Man it did, and Venom is like a breezy 61 minutes.
But to that there's that saying, I think that was like Roger Ebert that had said that, or I'm basically paraphrasing, where it's like, no good movie isn't long enough, and no bad movie isn't short enough. Like you need to like know that like it doesn't matter as long as it's good. I mean, there are some things when you're watching a film and you're kind of like thinking,
even
to
a
yourself,
good movie, you could go, hey, you could cut a little bit.
Exactly. You can still say that and be critical of it. Like there are some movies that don't need to be 2.5, 3 hours long, especially when you are bringing back a character that people are so familiar with. So it will be interesting to see why the Batman is 3 hours long or nearly 3 hours long. And part of it probably has to do with the world building, and they're establishing the tone of this version of Batman. They're reintroducing this character yet again, but also everything that we've heard news-wise, that they're expanding it into multiple series with the Gotham Police Department, with the Penguin, with Batgirl, even though that's in its own thing.
That's
but
the DCEU thing, but yeah.
But it's still like, it's still within the DC,
still the Bat family, even
yes,
if it's a different universe.
Yeah. And so with all of that, like, it kind of feels like, okay, how much of this is going to go off in all these other sort of like directions, and then like the murder mystery at the center of it. And like, I guarantee this is something I guarantee, not having read anything, not spoilers,
I will go to the bathroom at least 3 times.
That's one thing. But the second thing, which I think is important to note, is that I think it's going to begin with the death of Peter Skarsgård's district attorney character, and then at the end of the film we're going to be introduced to Harvey Dent. I think that's kind of where it's going to go.
So my mouth is full. Sorry. Do you think they've cast someone then for that?
Yes.
Yes, I pause do. As I chew. Okay. Who?
I think no, I don't know, but I think that's the other thing that we'll probably get a lot of, because Matt Reeves has said that the world of Batman's rogue gallery has already been created. Like, a lot of people are either in transition to become the villains that we know, or are already there in some capacity. So I have a feeling that's another thing, that the reason why this movie is going to be so long is that we'll probably take a detour and be introduced to villains and maybe surprise actors that we don't know that are in the film, that will be in future installments. And I have a feeling that is like the way that Batman Begins ends with the Joker card, even though at that time it wasn't necessarily a tip to a sequel. It was just kind of like a fun button at the end of that movie.
Again, yeah.
I do think that Harvey Dent will be the new DA that's brought in, like, at the end, to be like, oh, well, we got a new DA, his name's Harvey Dent. Or there will be a scene where we actually see Harvey Dent kind of going into a court case and flipping a coin or something. Like, it just kind of makes
maybe
sense.
If it's just from behind, or maybe they cast someone or whatever, but that would be dope. I think you're right about the Skarsgård thing. They've already kind of released that clip online of that sequence where he comes out with the bomb we've seen in the trailer and stuff like that. I didn't watch the whole thing because I'm kind of in lockdown mode, where I'm like, we're a month away from this thing. Like, I just want to see it. And
you have been listening to the theme,
the score,
that
which is available on streaming services now, or platforms, music streaming.
Spotify.
It's like 7 minutes long. Actually different than I anticipated. Like, it's got that brooding, like, dun 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 dun, but then there's that kind of classic Michael Giacchino kind of more tender, like, middle part to it that I wasn't necessarily expecting. So I absolutely can't wait for this movie. I love Matt Reeves. 3 hours sounds great to me. Like, again, good movie is good movie, and I hope it's great. Will I have to go to the bathroom a lot? Yes. But that's okay. I'll try to find I mean, I finally watched the entirety
Just
of the
buy that
Suicide
snack
Squad.
mask.
Yeah, yeah, that could work. And then because I missed scenes in both, like I miss a scene in every movie, so it's kind of fun rewatching them at home now because I'm like, oh, I didn't see that scene. It was something new. It's like a director's cut when I watch it at home. But yeah, I'm pumped for a 3-hour Matt Reeves Batman. I'm like, you know what? If I think again, it goes back to the right filmmaker. You know, it actually shows that the studio has confidence in it, I think, because most studios now would be like, there's no way we're letting you release a 3-hour movie because that's less show times and less money and things like that. So,
well, right now though, as well, like
yeah.
the lockdowns or limited capacity is one thing, and then on top of that, every other film for the most part has, in terms of like franchises or tent poles, has moved out of March because of the Batman. Partly, I mean, like Doctor Strange is one of them. So, as
Yes.
Matt chews on his food,
I try not to do that much more, but it's so good. It's very, very good. Paramount delayed a bunch of stuff, including Mission Impossible 7 and 8.
boo.
Yeah, which is a bummer. But it's interesting because you're seeing a lot of studios like, I mean, even Paramount with Scream and Jackass and Top Gun, which they didn't move. But something like Mission Impossible, maybe it's in because of the post production or whatever. But yeah, they punted them each a year, so we're still getting them back to back, like year after year. But it's 23 and 24 now instead of 22 and 23.
Tom Cruise is going to be in his early 60s.
It was wild.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then A Quiet Place Part 3 got moved as well, didn't it?
Yeah. That was the other one. I was trying to think of what the other one was, which is the one that is the spin-off one, which they was supposed to be, what's his name from
Jeff Nichols,
but he dropped out, and then they just hired someone, right?
The director of Pig.
Right. There we go. That wasn't something that was the week before. I didn't have it on this news listing, but that's awesome news, and I hope Nick Cage shows up in the Quiet Place universe now
as his character from Pig.
Yeah. That's a bummer about Mission Impossible.
But I mean, it's still being released. Like, that's the thing where, like, I delays suck, but at the same time, it's not like the movie didn't get made. You know, it will get released. It does at some point will come out, but you know, we have to wait a little bit longer. So, you know, that's
fine.
It's better than not having it, I guess.
Heat 2 is going to be a novel.
Oh yeah.
Are you going to read it?
I'll try. Yeah. I'm curious about it because I know Michael Mann, like, Heat has had such an interesting sort of trajectory. It started as a potential series and was actually shot as a pilot, and then it became the movie that it is. But you also had like Mann talking about, like, oh, I wanted to explore more with both, you know, these lead characters, and it seems like it's going to be doing that because it takes place in both 89 and 2002, so you can have both, you know, De Niro's character in 89 and then you can have Pacino in 2002 and kind of maybe connect those two dots, although I don't know if it is going to focus completely on those characters or if they'll just be maybe referenced or what have you. But
it probably is because of how they're doing it. I think it would be costly to de-age people and things like that.
De-age De Niro again.
Yeah, so I feel like this makes the most sense when it comes to doing something within Heat, which I will read it. I think I'll rewatch the original one in 4K and then probably read this. And it's definitely intriguing to see people use other mediums for sequels or something like that, or something in a universe, especially something like Heat, which isn't necessarily like building out the Heat cinematic universe or anything like that, right? But to revisit those characters and do it in a novel, I think
the Heativerse,
is really interesting. Quickly, Daniel Radcliffe is playing Weird Al in a biopic. Very interesting choice. I'm down. Daniel, did I say Daniel Craig? No, Daniel Radcliffe.
No, you said Radcliffe.
Okay.
Daniel Craig is Weird Al.
That would be even better. I like Radcliffe's like choices since leaving Harry Potter. I don't think he's not on a Rob Pattinson level of like of he's not as good of an actor, but always doing interesting or weird things. And I don't know if we needed a Weird Al biopic, but I'm down for it. I hope it's not as conventional as most biopics, but I don't know.
My Bologna, the Weird Al story.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, I'm a little disappointed Paul Rudd or you weren't cast in the role, but yeah, I mean, like Weird Al is an interesting enough guy that I think, like why not have a biopic? I guess it just depends on how it's told. Like if we get a conventional biopic and it's just going to be a dime a dozen kind of thing where it's like, oh, you just take an interesting subject and you kind of dilute it and water it down in a very conventional manner and show like, kind of maybe average moviegoers. It's like, oh, there's more to this kind of like novelty act than meets the eye. I would probably prefer a documentary, just thinking of like what Edgar Wright did with Sparks. Like Sparks is another band where it's
but
like,
do that with Weird Al.
Yeah, but obviously Weird Al is much sort of is better known than Sparks or a lot of those other novelty acts from the 1980s specifically. But
I saw Weird Al live at Casino Rama.
Will we get a scene where he's shooting Sandy Wexler behind the scenes?
Yeah.
But yeah, to your point, like I do like that Daniel Radcliffe, even though none of the three leads of Harry Potter have kind of been able to have the same success individually.
Rupert Grint on Servant, which we talked about earlier.
And I mean, Emma Watson's done okay with, Beauty and the Beast and the Bling Ring and stuff like that. But I like that. Yeah, Robert Pattinson is a much better actor, but there are movies like Swiss Army Man where like good for him for choosing something that is so off the beaten trail that can actually help sort of enhance a movie's profile and help a filmmaker. It's the same thing with Nicolas Cage where like even though Nicolas Cage has done a lot of trash in the last 10 years or so, if he gets a movie like Pig, he can really help that filmmaker, be a kind of stepping stone for their career and also kind of remind people why he's kind of a big deal. Daniel Craig can show that, hey, I can do this really weird sort of out of left field kind of movie with this, or I can even do kind of like, I know you're not as big of a fan of it, but like something even kind of as small and maybe as sweet as What If, or as it's known here in Canada as The F Word, which is another one of those movies that I think also should kind of be considered like short-term 12 with, having Zoe Kazan, Daniel Radcliffe, Adam Driver, Mackenzie Davis, Sarah Gadon, a whole bunch of, up and coming actors that are now very much, prominent within film and television. So yeah, I'm not against it. I mean, if we're getting biopics on Tammy Faye and everybody else, like why not?
Make it a musical. Like
exactly. Have fun with it. Do something. Live up to the name of Weird Al and do something like, even if it doesn't work, at least you can say that you tried something different.
Mm-hmm. Christmas Story 2 is happening. Or I guess not 2 because there was a Christmas Story 2.
There's actually two A Christmas Stories 2. So there's a summer story, or as it's called, It Runs in the Family, from 1991 or 1992 that has Charles Grodin and Mary Steenburgen in the lead roles, and Ralphie is the main character, but all the cast is played by different actors. And that movie is really hard to find, but it's not very good. And then you have A Christmas Story Part 2, which was a direct-to-video film.
Yes, there's going to be a lot of weird pauses as I shovel food into my mouth as Eric's speaking. But we're getting a direct sequel to the original Christmas Story, bringing back the dude that played Ralphie.
Peter Billingsley, star of Spider-Man Far From Home.
Is he?
He's the guy. That's Ralphie. He's the guy that's Jake Gyllenhaal's second in command, the bald guy with the glasses.
Right. You're absolutely correct. I totally forgot about that. And he's in Iron Man 1 then, right?
Yeah, and he directed Couples Retreat, and yeah, he's become a filmmaker now. Yeah.
Right. Good for him. I wonder, but he's not directing this, right? Or they
No,
haven't
I think he's
announced a
just
director.
starring in it.
Right. Anyways,
Starring.
A Christmas Story, one of those movies, not one that I go back to every holiday. I remember watching it as a kid, and I think my mom really liked it and stuff like that. As a dumbass kid, I always thought that movie was from the 50s and not the 80s. Like I did. It took me until like very recently to realize that movie was from like 1981 or something.
I think it's 83.
Or yeah.
Yeah.
But that being said, because it takes place in the 50s, I always just thought it was from the 50s, and I think they did such a good job with that cover and stuff like that to A Christmas Story that I always thought it was much older than it was.
Yeah.
And
Shot in St. Catharines, Ontario.
There you go. Will they come back? We'll see. And now this one will take place in the 70s and continue that story. So
the Boogie Nights version of A Christmas Story
or something. Yeah, something like that. Or 70s or 80s, I forget the time jump that they would have to do.
TBS plays this, or they used to
yeah.
all the time. Like there was one year where they played it for 24 hours straight. And to your point, like I think it's a good movie. I don't necessarily love the film, but I admire it for what it is. I always, as a kid, like my dumb thing, I always thought that the voiceover narrator was Adam West. But yeah, it has those like classic moments that you remember, like, you know, I double dog dare you with that, you know, Ralphie wearing the onesie gun that his aunt gave him, the Red Ryder.
It's an iconic movie.
Yes.
Like the lamp, the leg lamp.
Fragile.
Right? Yeah. So definitely an iconic movie.
Going to the Chinese restaurant for dinner at the end.
But it's just weird that it's not one that I go back to ever, really. But like
it's such a strange movie because like Darren McGavin's probably the biggest name of that movie at the time. But it's not a film that necessarily is associated with like a star being like a big name actor being in a Christmas movie. It's just selling it on the nostalgia of people that, you know, grew up in the 1950s specifically, who were of that right age in the early 80s. But it's also, I guess maybe the most interesting thing about it is that Bob Clark, who kind of became an honorary Canadian, who since passed away, has directed, he's probably now best known as, or his career defining moments are doing two complete polar opposite Christmas movies, with the original Black Christmas and A Christmas Story, both of which shot in Toronto and shot in St. Catharines. And, you know, Black Christmas is, you know, considered to a lot of people to be the first sort of POV horror film where you see the point of view of the killer. And like, that is a great horror movie. And it still, I think, works quite well today. And then, you know, that's in the late 80s and then, or 70s. And then in the early 80s, he goes off and makes A Christmas Story. And, you know, like, say what you will about, like, because he also directed Porky's and Baby Geniuses and things like that. And like a lot of people, obviously, like when they reference Baby Geniuses now, they make fun of the point, and they should, that John Voight's in all like 5 or 6 of them that because there's like 6 of these movies. But yeah, I just find that that's very interesting.
We should have probably went off of our Batman chat into Bong Joon-ho has his next film, and it's going to be starring Robert Pattinson. Warner Brothers, I believe, is distributing it, and it's called Mickey 7, which is
the book is called Mickey 7.
Yeah, and who knows if the movie will be titled that, but it's based off of a unreleased novel, which is coming out, I think, in February, in a couple weeks, called Mickey 7, about it kind of has Moon vibes to me. Did you read the premise of it, Eric? Where
I did. Well, you know what it also reminds me of? That they're also developing, not Warner Brothers, but it came out last year, as Andy Weir's project Hail Mary.
Which the Phil Lord and Chris Miller were attached to.
Yeah, and then you also have Denis Villeneuve, who's working on Rendezvous with Rama, which was a movie that David Fincher was going to make in the late 90s, early 2000s, which is about a group of astronauts that encounter alien life for the first time in distant space. So I wonder, like, you know, to your point where, you know, we're getting 2 Pinocchio movies this year, I wonder if all these 3 projects specifically will end up coming out around the same time, or if one of them will kind of, you know, go into turnaround because one of these movies gets into fast tracked or goes into production first.
Yeah. And just shout out to Robert Pattinson, man. That guy's resume since he left Twilight of just going, okay, which all-star director do I want to work with next? And just
Which
like,
weirdo do I want to?
yeah. And like, I will just go at whether it's like a smaller all-star director, a big name director, whatever, but he's just made really interesting choices since he's left Twilight. And I mean, just even Bong Joon-ho choosing his next movie after Parasite took a little while. We're still getting that Parasite TV series on HBO with Adam McKay as well, but who knows how far along they are for that. We got some casting in that too. Wasn't Mark Ruffalo going to be in it? And
It was rumored that Tilda Swinton
yeah.
and Mark Ruffalo were going to be leads in that, but I don't think they ever actually confirmed that. And the other thing that they haven't confirmed is that Tilda Swinton said that she was also going to be in Bong Joon-ho's next movie. So she also might be in this film, but
Right.
Bong Joon-ho was also saying that he was working on 2 other films, one that would be completely in South Korea, and then the other one was going to be a film that was going to be an international movie that was a disaster film horror movie hybrid. So
it does look like this will be the next one though, because it's the furthest along with casting and stuff. I'm pumped, can't wait for it. What else do we got? What do we got before we talked about Skydance signing a first look deal with Apple TV Plus? We talked about Knives Out coming this fall. And the Godzilla TV series at Apple TV. And the last couple bits of news, Mary Elizabeth Winstead is joining the Star Wars universe in Ahsoka. We don't know who she is playing, but she just got cast in that series. I like her.
this is good.
Intriguing to see who she'll play in the Ahsoka series. So absolutely down for that. And then Neva's just texted me actually, which is something we haven't talked about on the show, but the Critics' Choice Awards, they do have a new date. They were postponed because of the pandemic. March 13th is the date right now for the Critics' Choice Awards. So I feel like we should give that a shout out since we are voting members, and we'll need to vote on that, I guess, relatively soon. I guess we still have a month, which is nice. And it's the same day as the BAFTAs. So people are not thrilled with that.
No.
So,
yeah.
And pretty close to the Oscars too, right? Because when are the Oscars?
Well, the nominations are February 8th. So
my birthday.
So happy birthday, Matt. Your
birthday
will be drowned out with who got snubbed and who got nominated.
We'll get to talk about it on my birthday.
Oh, we'll get to talk about Jared Leto being nominated for supporting actor on your birthday. Happy birthday, Matt.
Great. And then the Oscars are March 27th, so pretty close to that.
Yeah.
So I remember that they said the nominees are, so I gotta wake up. Isn't it like so early, or it's more early for the West Coast people?
Yeah,
so
it's like 5 a.m. in the US
and
like 8 or 9 here Eastern time.
So
I kind of miss the old way that they would do it, like back in like the late 90s, early 2000s, where the podium, there would be a podium and there would be this like wall with 5 TV screens embedded into it, and like each category would come up and they'd have like 5 slots, and it would say like best supporting actor, and like as they would announce the nominees for best supporting actor, the name would first pop up on one of the TVs, and then the picture of the actor's face from the film would pop up, and then the same thing for each one. And I remember the one year that they did that for it was 2011, was for the year that Jessica Chastain got her first nomination, which was for The Help for supporting actress. But instead of putting a photo of her from The Help, they put a photo of her from The Tree of Life.
Love that. Love mistakes like that. I'm pretty excited about it. I mean, we talk that we love award season, as ridiculous as it is. So they haven't even talked about who's hosting or anything.
That it might be multiple hosts.
That's something that just came out the other day on Variety. The photo I see right here has The Rock, Selena Gomez, and Kevin Hart. But there was a rumor at one time that it was going to be the 3 leads of Only Murders in the Building, with Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Selena Gomez.
But Steve Martin doesn't seem like he wants to do it anymore. Like there was the time where he did, like the last time he did it, which was like 2010, 2009. He kind of seemed like he was done then. Like he just didn't seem interested anymore.
Yeah, and this this article is like listing people and how likely they are. So they're saying like The Rock, not likely, Kevin Hart, not happening, Jimmy Kimmel's not going to do it. So who they want is Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Selena Gomez, because it is on ABC. We always have to remember that, where,
cross promotion.
Yeah, cross promotion, corporate synergy, as the kids like to say. They want to get someone from the Disney kind of brand. So Only Murders in the Building makes sense because it is a Hulu series, star in other countries on Disney Plus.
Well, you know who's best for the role? Josh Duhamel.
Yeah, you got promoted. Yeah, I don't know. There was rumors that Tom Holland and or something like that, which seems silly, and Zendaya. That seems a bit silly.
Gabriel from Malignant was considered at one point.
The 3 Spider-Men, but I don't think that any of that will happen. I don't know. It's interesting. Like
Terry Funk.
I kind of dug the vibe of the Oscars last year. Even with God, remember them not giving out Best Picture last, and they thought they'd give it to Chadwick Boseman, and then it just went to Anthony Hopkins,
who wasn't even there, and they didn't allow him to send. They didn't allow him to send his own video, like
Soderbergh.
And you know what they were going for, and like that's,
but you can't do that for that reason.
Yeah.
So that's what I liked the toned down vibe of it. There's the awkward moments, obviously, when they were doing the like.
I missed the Oscar clips though. I missed the not the clips that are like montages of, like decades past or like the history of the Academy, but just like the Oscar clips for the acting awards. Because like when you really care about somebody being nominated, like Paul Raci for Sound of Metal, it would be nice to see that clip of,
and especially
like
for
him.
People who are watching that haven't seen all of the movies,
exactly,
right? Because I think the majority of people, this is a kind of a piece of advertising for a lot of these movies, even though it's a celebration of them. It's like the reason you have the Oscars is to convince people going, ooh, that one's award worthy. Like, and it gets a bump in video sales or gets a re-release in theaters when that was happening and stuff too. So yeah, I'm with you.
And shout out to Oscar Clips on Twitter, because they have this account that posts clips from
previous
acting nominations from previous years,
just to see what scenes they choose.
And it's like the ones that I always remembered, and it's fun to see that they get the most engagement, because the one that got the most engagement recently, and I think of all time for this Twitter account, was the Stanley Tucci reaction to his clip for The Lovely Bones, because he has been very kind of adamant that he's not a fan of that movie, and
right.
He's not a fan of that performance because he doesn't like the character specifically.
Yeah.
And so the scene that they kind of like, or the scenes that they used with him, I mean, the character being a child molester, they show that scene and then they cut to Stanley Tucci and he's like
horrified.
And then the other one that is great is Cate Blanchett, who was nominated twice the year that I think it was 2007 for Elizabeth the Golden Age, and I'm Not There, the Bob Dylan biopic that is kind of chronicling different parts of his life, played by different actors, directed by Todd Haynes. When her clip shows or goes for Elizabeth, her reaction is literally this: they cut to her face and she's just like,
yeah. Yeah, I love that kind of stuff. So
and Rami Malek's is amazing as well. So Rami Malek, like, I mean, I'm sure you remember this one though, Matt, because it was more recently, but it's amazing when you see they show a scene of Bradley Cooper in A Star Is Born, and he's, like giving this lived in performance and actually sings in the movie. And then they and Rami Malek in Bohemian Rhapsody, and it's just him lip syncing and pretending to play on the piano. And you're just like, how did he win? Like, even if you don't love A Star Is Born, like the performance that Bradley Cooper gave in that movie, like,
we could do many episodes on snubs or wrong people winning. Or
I mean, we will
Oscar
on your birthday.
Yeah, I know. Happy birthday to me. Can't wait. I'm going to follow Oscar Clips on. Is it just Oscar Clips or?
Yeah, it should be just Oscar Clips.
I'll find it after this.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for watching or listening. I apologize. I ate my dinner while we were recording, but I was starving. I had a protein shake for lunch and that's it. So I was real hungry. I hope it wasn't too distracting, but it'll make for some funny screen caps probably. If you like this, we have a lot of other reviews we would love for you guys to check out right now. I know we're behind and we owe you a Tragedy of Macbeth review. I promise we'll get that to you guys soon. It's just, I don't know, with everything, it just kind of fell off. And I know Eric and I do want to talk about it. So you guys should get that.
I have a review on
soon.
Rogers TV.
Just plug that. Yeah. rogerstv.com/cinemascene. Check out Eric's review. He liked it a lot more than I did. So you might as well just go listen to his review. We might eventually talk about it, but we do have reviews up right now for the aforementioned After Party, the first 3 episodes. You guys can check that out. Peacemaker, the first 3 episodes. Yellow Jackets, the complete first season. Cobra Kai 4, that complete season. So a lot of streaming reviews right now. The Kingsman, which will be on Disney Plus.
February 18th.
February 18th. Paul Thomas Anderson's Licorice Pizza, Sean Baker's Red Rocket, Guillermo del Toro's Nightmare Alley, which we mentioned on the show, Spider-Man, both a spoiler and spoiler-free review. So
and Nightmare Alley counts as CanCon.
Yeah, it does. Oshawa, yay. I'm curious about the black and white cut that they put out, which I didn't even know they did.
Yeah. Well, did you see that Martin Scorsese wrote a piece in, I think it was like the LA Times or LA Weekly, that said like, people need to go and see this movie because you have to support like real cinema and like I love Martin Scorsese and like I get his enthusiasm for a film that is kind of like, tactile and but it is what it is, Marty. Come on. And it's also going to be like released shortly on, or at least in the US, on Hulu, which I'm sure we'll get on Star here because that's usually what's been happening. So we have lots of reviews and we'll have even more from streaming stuff coming up soon, and theaters are opening next week. So excuse me, we'll have Five Cream, we'll have Jackass, we'll have other things. So I'm excited for that. And then if you want to go to the backlog of episodes of this show, we talked about the legacy of the Jackass franchise, as well as what we've kind of been doing to kill time and eating during these cinemas being closed. And then we also have 2 fantastic 3-hour episodes of the best movies of 2022 and the best movies of 2021. I got to change that title. That's the wrong title. And the most anticipated movies of this year. We're professionals here. That's funny. I just caught that now. I did not realize that's I didn't catch it either, so it's on both of us, not just you. And then the Moon Knight conversation. If that all sounded way too convoluted, you can get those on YouTube and podcast services, but just head over to our letterbox, which is Untitled_movies. We keep that updated with all of the links to our YouTube reviews, and then in the reviews you can also find links to the podcast versions and everything over there. So that's probably your easiest one-stop shop for everything. Remember, this Friday the 28th we are doing a live episode of this show at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. It'll be myself, Eric, and Greg Miller of Kinda Funny. We'll talk about video game movies. We'll talk about day and date releases and the Hardy Boys. Yeah, who the hell knows what else we'll talk about. Royal Rumble is this weekend. Will we talk wrestling? Maybe. You'll see. But until next time, as always, my name is Matt Rohrbeck. You can find more of my work around the internet, but mostly at UntitledMoviePodcast.com. And you can follow me on all those social medias at Matt Rohrbeck. And I'm Eric Marchin. You can find more of my video reviews at rogerstv.com/cinemascene, with reviews, as Matt mentioned, for the Tragedy of Macbeth and Matrix Resurrections and things like that. And you can find me on the social media. Things we just didn't do here for some reason. And The Lost Daughter. And you can find me on the social medias at EM6211. And where can they find you or find us as a show, one-stop shop, Matt? Untitled_movies on Letterboxd. Yes. Until next time. I hope Josh Duhamel joins us for an episode. God, wouldn't that be great? Bye, everyone.